Hello, welcome back to Pixels and Points. We're here today. I'm Susie Brown with Redroc Media Buyer Planner, and I've got with me, as usual,
I'm Matt Nelsen, the digital media director here at Redroc, and with our special guest, Susie, you want to introduce him?
yep, we have our special guests from Spectrum. We've got Alex and Liz, and if y'all want to say a quick hi and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex Rios. I'm a sales manager at Spectrum Reach. We're here in the Austin office, and I've got Liz Stewart with me.
Yep, I'm Liz Stewart. I'm an account executive here at Spectrum Reach, and my 7-year anniversary is today, actually,
Woo!
at Spectrum. So, yeah, it's great to be here.
That's great. Well, we're glad you were able to join us. We invited you, kind of wanted to pick your things about all things Spectrum, everything you guys have going on over there. And one of our first things we were going to talk about was this addressable table of elements, which we think is a pretty cool tool to kind of look at and use.
Awesome. I guess I'll open up and kind of just talk about what this is. If it reminds you of 7th grade, chemistry class, that's the goal. But it is actually a project from Evan Shapiro. He's a media sort of cartographer is what he calls himself. And he just really studies the media landscape from a 30,000 foot view. And he recently put together this table, which really talks about the whole, programmatic landscape of buying. Really, mostly the focus on this is connected television, but it's about all the different players that are involved in buying and selling connected television, streaming TV, OTT, and the big picture of where this is coming from is looking at the quality of data that supports the targeting. So everyone can agree targeting is important, reducing waste is important, but there is actually a lot of difference when you dig into the different providers that are out there in terms of the inventory and what supports the targeting. So the main thing to look at on this table is the far left-hand column, and that is kind of what we can talk about it, which is essentially a breakdown from the highest quality of targeting, which is what's called deterministic targeting, down to the least targetable or the least likely to be the correct person that you're after, which is the probabilistic. So we can kind of go through those different levels and sort of where people stand in that relative range. So that's really what this is all about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the setup for the addressability conversation, which you all can speak to as media buyers as well, is that in this current connected TV space, the exclusivity of inventory is no longer the biggest differentiator, I would say, among all the different vendors and different platforms. In Evan Shapiro's latest podcast episode with Dan Callahan, they were talking about how at the latest upfront, most if not all of the vendors there were saying that they can serve on the NFL, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of no matter who you are, there's a lot of crossover these days with inventory. And so the thing that's really setting ad value apart is the quality of the data. So that's why this chart is important. And I think that's why Evan created it, to kind of show us in a very simple visual form how to evaluate inventory. And where
we've talked a lot about how, as far as content goes, it's all live sports, live events, right? That's, as a media buyer, what we are looking for. But like you said, almost everybody can sell that now, right? Everyone has access to that inventory, maybe different games, but it's kind of all spread out amongst all these different providers. So for a buyer, that's great to be able to pick and choose, but where can we find it all in one place?
Exactly. Yeah. I think too, an interesting point that they mentioned in that podcast episode was that addressability. A lot of people claim, like Alex was saying, this is addressable targeting, and it's not a question of what, but how. Like how are you addressably targeting down to the household level with your connected television buy? So, yeah, I don't know, Alex, you want to talk about the sliding scale of?
Yeah, let's kind of go into it of thinking about agencies, media buyers, things to look out for, things to ask about, inquire when you're looking at possibly a new inventory source. So I guess let's start from the bottom up. So when you're buying, especially through like a pure play digital platform that doesn't have any access point to the actual household, meaning they don't have some sort of billing relationship to a household, a lot of the data that they'll rely on is IP address data. And so IP address data, some of the challenges with that are going to be things like if you look at a particular household, there could be multiple IP addresses within that home. And IP addresses can also change dynamically based on a variety of situations that could happen, whether you have a situation where you're even resetting your router, for example. So when you look at the marketplace of buying connected television, right now, so I think for 2024, this was a stat from the episode where this slide was derived from. They talked about how campaigns that rely exclusively on IP address data were on average somewhere around 60 to 65% accurate, meaning 35 to 40% was potentially seen by bot traffic.
Right, right. How do we eliminate all that fraud?
Yeah, so you want to always be layering on additional data sources to help validate, the waste reduction. The next level up is email address data. That is a helpful additional data point, but they still see challenges with email addresses where people can be using multiple email addresses. People can be creating an email address just to download an app or put in some request for a giveaway or whatever it may be, and then
I do that all the time.
I don't know if that's you. I've done it before. I know I'm guilty of that.
Or even signing up for a streaming service for a week just to watch one show, right, or one program, and then putting a random email on there. So, and then they bounce out.
And so going on up that kind of stair step, the highest level of deterministic data that's available in this ecosystem is going to be tied to the companies that have first party data in that they have a direct relationship to a home. So those are the MVPDs of the world, Spectrums, the Comcasts, as well as the big telco companies, the AT&Ts, the Verizons. And what they have that goes a level beyond is having that actual direct relationship. They have the address of the home, they have the credit card on file, they have the billing profile, they know who's in the home, they know that human. There's a very, very solid relationship. So when the Go Addressable Summit, the trade organization that worked with Evan Shapiro on creating this table, they did a study where they looked at what was the accuracy rate of campaigns that use first-party deterministic data through one of these types of providers compared to campaigns relying just on IP address data, and it was about 95% accuracy compared to that 60 to 65% accuracy of IP address only. So that is the thing that is, we want to help educate clients, buyers, everybody, the marketplace on that value proposition, because at the end of the day, when you're looking at price points, you might see something that's less expensive. You want to be figuring in how much potential of that dollar spend is wasted on potential fraud or not the right person. And so that's really the big crux of what this is looking at. And what we're really trying to educate the marketplace. And it's not just Spectrum, but this is just something that first-party data providers, internet service providers, those types of players, they're trying to support the ecosystem with that.
Yeah, and this goes much wider than just video. I mean, it has to touch on some of the stuff that we've talked about before, but with not only bot traffic that comes to sites, but not only that, but when you're talking about display and just video advertising, not specifically OTT, you're also having to hit MFAs, which are made for advertising sites. And so a lot of people are fighting, having an issue with that. Where on that video they were talking about how, they were saying like 30 to 40% was bot traffic, and I'm like, well, I read a bunch of articles from last year that was saying that at least 40 to 60% of internet advertising traffic was on MFAs. So it's just, and everybody's having an issue getting through all that. And one of the issues that we have is like, well, how do we fight MFAs? Like we sign up for all of those brand safety kind of services that are available, and they're supposed, and those might save us from some of the MFAs. But even if we wanted to go with the stronger way, we'd have to, say we only want to be on specific websites, which is a whitelist. I was like, okay, so you're on a whitelist. How does that save you from bot traffic? Like, it's everywhere you turn, you're having to fight a different battle with trying to make sure that your ad dollars are going to the right places. And it's just the situation that we live in now is just going to be a constant fight. And people would say IP addresses. Well, I could bring up my computer and it shows that I'm in Georgetown, or I'm in, which I'm not, or I'm at one point there was times where I was showing like I was in Dallas or I was in San Francisco. So it's all over the place. The only way you can do this kind of where you can be where 95% is where you're going to have addressable, where you can show that this person is that exact location, which as an internet provider you can do that. The only other way to do that is kind of like Amazon's. If we're doing Amazon Prime directly, a lot of the people who are on Amazon Prime, like that's their Prime account. They have an address set up, and so Amazon really knows where these people are, and it's going to be tied to that. The only other, I mean, some of the bigger ones have some addressable utilities, but there's still a lot of the traffic that you get served through here. It's you put in like a zip code, and you just have to say like, well, we targeted that, and the service says that we're running to that zip code and that we're getting clicks that are coming from that zip code. So you have to trust some of the system a little bit. And I mean, even if we have 40% waste, and I mean, not waste, but fraud, it's something that we're having to deal with. And it's hard to explain that to a client. They're like, why aren't you being 100% not? Because we can't run everything through addressable. We have to run some stuff on, like, you can't, it's just going to get harder and harder. But, and with AI coming, all of the MFAs and the bots are getting smarter about masking who they are and where they are. So it's good that there is an option to where we can show that we're being addressable, and there's other options that are coming out, and hopefully some of the providers start, incorporating some of this kind of information and into other DSPs, because it's not an option right now. It's an option that everybody needs to have, and it'd just be nice. But
100%.
Getting that matched in the cross device graph, which I know I'm using a lot of jargon. Sorry, anybody else is watching this, but trying to get that all matched. They use the emails, and we were talking about emails, about how they, you have a throwaway email, or it's all linked across different things, but like it knows if you're logged into Google, that Google address is also associated with this Disney Plus account, and it matches everything across everything. So that's handy, but still, you could still have fraud and waste in that. And I mean, fraud is a lot different than waste. I keep on saying them the same, because as we all came from a traditional media buying background, waste means that, you some of your impressions went to people that weren't your target audience.
Sure.
Still, they went to real people.
Right. This is not even a person.
It wasn't I would say it wasn't a complete waste. It was just waste considering your target audience. But now if it's going to bots, it is a complete and utter waste of your advertising dollars. So just trying to get that all centered and effective is just always the challenge. And it's
I think there's an understanding, right, that behavioral targeting that does rely on IP address data, website traffic type data, contextual targeting where you're looking at specific placements based off the type of context that it has. Those things are all still hold a level of value. And I think the challenge and the part that we're trying to instill is look at that holistically and layer in portions that are going to help bring the overall accuracy of the campaign up. So, whether you're going to a Spectrum Reach or you go to any other provider, that's the question to ask is what portion of this is based off first party data? What portion of this is based off IP address data?
And does the CPM match?
Yeah.
As well.
Yes.
The more general to the more specific, even within addressable claims, are you paying the same for a behavioral as you are for a deterministic source kind of thing?
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think is helpful to remind, anyone looking into getting into digital marketing and media buying is that there are these trade organizations that are dedicated to the whole concept of reducing fraud and waste in the marketplace. So, one of the biggest ones called the Accountability Group, TAG, and they have a pretty stringent, qualifiers for getting a certification, whether it's like a demand side platform, whether it's a managed service company or whatever it may be. That's another question to ask is what type of brand safety certifications, fraud reduction certifications do you have, and look for the highest levels of those. And if that's something that's completely not on their radar at all, that could be a potential red flag for that type of provider.
Yeah, what I hate about the brand safety providers is if you dig into some of what they offer, it's not about bot trap. Like they say they're not gonna this is bot safety algorithm or whatever it is, but it's just sites that are more likely to have bot traffic on them. It's not going to protect you from bots if you're running on, MSN.com or Yahoo.com or any of the main FoxNews.com. It's not going to save you from the traffic that's going on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, there's even brand safety in an ecosystem of itself has different levels of those organizations that are doing those certifications. And you even have to think about which one of those has the highest quality and what do they measure on. And that's an interesting one I hadn't considered, but that's one to add to the question list. There's a lot of questions you got to go through to get to the core of the quality.
All right. So when we talk about addressability with Spectrum Reach, with what y'all are doing, are there any, and I mean, we don't have to stay on this too long, but are there any hurdles or what are y'all looking at climbing over next? What are the limitations right now to this, and what are y'all hoping comes next in the service so that it becomes even better?
Yeah. You want to start? Or you want to start?
What pops into my mind is, legal concerns of privacy and that kind of thing. Our company does a really good job of making sure everything is anonymized and that we are above board on that kind of thing for our targeting. We run into more limitations, I would say, on healthcare related targeting, financial institutions and that kind of thing. So there are different categories where we have to be careful just so that we're actively not discriminating. We're protecting our audiences from being targeted in a way where we're giving away their data. That's, the specificity of the data is great, but you also have to be careful when you have specific data, right? About protecting your audience and your customers. So
Yeah.
I know our company does a great job of that, and I think there are rules in place with the government and so on and so forth that keep us in check, so that we work with our advertisers and agencies to make sure that we're specifically targeting, but also being being safe in that regard and protecting customers. So
Yeah, I think my answer is also, or to piggyback off of that, I think it's kind of like it's a challenge, but also something that we take pride in a way, because we are, being the nation's largest connectivity company puts us in a bucket where we're more federally regulated than a pure play digital company. And because of that, when it comes to things like privacy compliance, we are at the highest level. And so sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where we're competing against, or being compared against a digital pure play type of option that doesn't have the same levels of oversight federally that we would have. So that's always something that, it's a pro and a con. But I think the other part for us, like from my perspective, is also the education standpoint, because this very conversation and this table is part of what we are talking to with clients every day, because even the word addressable can sometimes be defined by 10 different uh, media buyers or advertisers in 10 different ways, right? So getting into the granularity of that deterministic versus probabilistic concept and explaining that and educating, that's always kind of like the everlasting part of the business is education and staying on top of the evolution of it.
Oh yeah, that's what we're always preaching is there's so many new things coming out, so many different avenues to go through, so many different ways for these other companies to be committing this fraud. And you've got to stay on top of it and know what's coming next, right? Before it even hits, so we can already start to combat the next new thing.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. As an advertiser, and more of like if a client sees this or reads a transcript, what's the oh, says host has left the broadcast. Don't know if that's you.
Oh,
I'm still here.
We're still good.
Here.
Matt, everyone's still here.
Is there any questions that a client needs to ask when they're being presented this, when it's not something from you? I just don't know if there's any like bad actors out of there or something that might be saying, and Susie has left, Susie's back. Maybe
a little blip. I'm back.
We're still good. But just like when they see this from somebody else, what's the questions that they need to ask of them to make sure that when they're being sold something that they say is addressable, that they're actually getting what they're being sold?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll give my take and Liz can add to it. But I think the main question goes back to do the data that's powering the targeting of this campaign. So the question is always going to be, tell me more about the makeup of that data, where it's coming from, and that's where you want to be vigilant about understanding these, that far left-hand column and how those different data points compare in accuracy level.
Yeah, because we've seen addressable not only from the internet providers, but from mobile phone kind of app producers and aggregators and things like that. So they're able to. They show like, well, this person had their cell phone and they went this and then they did that, because everybody does everything on their phones now, and they look like they end up at this address. So this is their address, and we're going to be we're going to be targeting that IP address. But then you're having to deal with IPs, and it gets a lot. It gets a little confusing like that. Have y'all worked with any like cross device, including internet data? I mean, mobile phone data kind of information systems, and integrating that with y'all's system?
Yeah, we'd have to get our research team in the house, but we have 70 different data providers all in Spectrum Reach, and they have, I think, around a $30 million investment across all these providers. So I'm pretty confident that mobile is one of the data providers, the specific one I'm not sure about, but Spectrum does offer mobile services as well, and that's a first-party data point that I don't think we're getting access to yet from the advertising side, but it is. I think that might be an answer to one of your previous questions about what's on the future roadmap. What are things you're excited about? Getting access to that additional data point is another one.
All right. And when using addressable, like what's your dream client when they come in and they have like what data they want, rather than just saying I need to be in these neighborhoods? Is it just like they have first party data that you're like this will mesh perfectly with what addressable will provide for you, or what's your dream situation?
Dream client.
I mean, a large category for us is automotive. We have a ton of different auto targeting. We almost worked with y'all with, convertibles and aftermarket, all kinds of different really cool automotive targeting that we have that's always expanding. That's a big priority for us, I think, as a company, is auto. I know we had in garage for a while, but we just got in market for make. So in market for Volkswagen or in market for Chevy, which is pretty cool. So, but I think, again, like we were talking, for automotive, you want to have that specificity, but it's also important to have that other layer of just general auto intender, because people aren't always, brand loyal. So, yeah, I think auto is a big one for us.
Yeah, I think for me, just to give you all a recent example, we have a client that's really after improving the quality of leads that are inbound. So they're doing a lot of social video. Social video is one of those concepts that is challenged by first-party data, because they don't have that deterministic qualifier, right? So they're using a lot of the context of what people are doing on their social platforms. And so what the client is seeing is that they aren't getting as much of a return when the lead comes down to the price point of what they're selling. So they need a qualifier up front to make sure that the person who's seeing their ad can afford the product. So in this case, it's a very high-end product that costs $50,000. It's a wine cellar remodeling kind of concept. So think like, this multi-million-dollar home that is going to be able to afford that. So one of the things we're doing with the addressable concept is, since we have, in a market like Austin, Texas, there's nearly 500,000 Spectrum internet subscribers. So homes that we have that direct relationship with, we're able to see which of those homes through our third-party data partnerships, like an Experian, for example, we can identify which homes are both multi-million-dollar home values, which is a bigger qualifier for this client than household income. In fact, it's the value of the home. And it's also a combination of, have they shown an interest, been a wine consumer enthusiast? So you have behavioral targeting, which says, hey, I went to totalwine.com or I went to specs.com. That's a behavior online, but it may not qualify up to saying that is someone who can afford a $50,000 wine cellar project in their multi-million-dollar home. So with the addressable side, we got to locate the multi-million-dollar homes who also, based off actual spending data from those same credit cards that are attached to their billing profile on, high-end wine subscriptions. So with those two things, they've seen a much higher lift in not necessarily the lead count, but the actual conversion rates of the leads that are coming in. So that's just one example of the ideal case of an addressable.
And with any kind of digital advertising, when you get to that kind of level of detail, you want to make sure your geography is big enough to have enough audience. That's always the two dials that you have to get with. Everybody wants to say they're super targeted, but then they also want to be, I only want these 10 zip codes. So it's always a challenge when you get to that point. So
definitely,
I mean, it's a dream client is one that has a lot of good first party data that you can use to kind of maybe look at, these are the audiences. This is your consumer. Like, have a great idea. Like, look, these people also, everybody that has bought your product has also, subscribed to this magazine, or is, watches this show, or has this activity. And then it's great to be able to expand off of that. But then and if you're able to get a really niche audience, it's the geography that you want to be able to expand with. So it's, and y'all have the ability to, go to all these other markets and increase the audience. But it's some of our clients and some of the clients, like, they want to constrict it, just to the Austin market. And so putting on layers and layers of detail on some of this is probably not the best solution.
Yeah,
but that right amount of targeting to where, we have a good enough, large enough audience to hit, and that it's the right audience. And I mean, some audiences are harder to get, and sometimes being a little bit more broad is going to be better, especially when some of your audience is not going to be very well defined by a certain specific, category. Like some of ours, like people who need a roof. Like, you have people who have gotten hailed on recently, and that's going to be your audience you're going to have to run to. But other than that, if you're just doing general branding for roof repair and roof replacement, it's maybe a certain type of houses and things like that. But it gets a little bit hairy when you're trying to do that specific targeting.
Yeah, there's a sweet spot between too general and too specific. We don't want someone who's trying to reach everybody, because that's going to be pretty tough, and it's more specific.
Right, your message gets lost.
It's just getting clients. You can't target this big of an audience and expect this much return with as many people coming back. So it's trying to temper that expectation. But
our best practice, I think, for now is like 2 to 3 addressable segments at a time for a campaign for a given client, like income, homeowner, and retiree. 3 segments max before we start running into clearance issues or removing frequency caps, and you're just telling the same people over and over again your message. So
and it goes back to that part about, like, you don't want to put all your eggs in a single basket with the targeting component. So layer in the contextual, layer in some behavioral, but just also, whenever there's an opportunity to add frequency against maybe a smaller segment of the audience, but the most perfect audience, if you have the ability to do that, you want to take advantage of it if you can.
Absolutely.
All right. Is there anything else we wanted to chat on this? I think it's good.
Yeah, I think we've covered it all. I definitely am saving this chart to my desktop for reference.
Well, thank you so much for having us. This has been a blast.
Yes, thank you so
this
much.
has been great. Thanks for joining us.
Definitely one of our longer sessions, even though we're having technical difficulties apparently.
Yes.
But so thanks for hanging on.
We solved it.
Yep.
We
We solved it. Thanks for bearing with us, and we'll be back next week with more pixels and points with you guys.
All right. Bye, Matt and Susie.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.